Welcome to our panel. You'll find that we've got great panelists today, including myself, not to be bashful. It's a mixture of bankers, lawyers, and developers. Everyone's going to do their own introduction, but we've got Richard Wilkinson from the Erste Group. We've got Maria Bojovic from Bojovic and Partners. We've got Đuro Stanic from Marina Asset Management. And then we've got Josif Jušković from Komercijalna banka. So as you can see, we've got a nice array of panelists, so it'll be an interesting panel. So to kick off, we'll just have a kind of brief introduction from everybody, just a little bit of background of what you do and how long you've been kind of in the region. And we'll just go down the line. So we'll start off with yourself, Richard.
Okay. I'm Richard Wilkinson. I'm responsible for the commercial real estate business of Erste Group across Central Europe. That's a 13 billion euro financing portfolio. We're also a developer across the region, but also in Belgrade. We're just in the process of finalizing the first phase of our Sirius building.
Hello, my name is Maria Bojovic. I'm a lawyer, a partner in Bojovic and Partners law firm. We are a law firm specialized mostly for foreign investments in Serbia. We are fully fledged, and I have 16 years of experience, and also, among other things, I'm devoted to real estate consulting.
Hello everyone, my name is Đuro Stanic. I'm Director of Marine Holdings and Marine Asset Management. We are a project management company that is investing its own funds, but also funds of other investors, and providing a fully integrated business platform for managing projects from the very beginning to the end. Currently we have around 120,000 square meters of different real estate projects under development. Thank you.
Hello everyone, I'm Josif Jušković. I'm from Commercial Bank of Belgrade. I'm division director, corporate division director in the bank for the large corporate clients with income more than 20 million euros. Responsible for special project financing, special financing, and normal financing of a large corporate client in the commercial bank. So we have some special financing even today. We are dealing with one big project today, and we can discuss today about some issues related to the banks and related to the construction and the special financing. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated. You know, over the past 2 years, I'm a lawyer by trade, and we represent UK and US investors who want to come and invest in the region. And I've been hearing over the past couple of years, especially over the past year, how doing business in Serbia has become a lot easier, especially from a real estate perspective. So I'd like to kind of ask some of the panel members, you know, what's their view, how things have improved. You know, I think I don't know what the positioning was. Serbia's risen from like 200 to, 80, 70. I'm not sure what the numbers were, but there's been a significant improvement in being able to do business in the region. So maybe we'll ask the panelists from a legal perspective, from a banking perspective, and then on the development side, on the ground, what's kind of improved over the past year or so. And being an English gentleman, I think I'll start off with the ladies. So Maria, please.
Thank you, Peter. Definitely things did improve, and of course this ranking of the World Bank on doing business in 2017 shows, because Serbia jumped to 116 spots up. It's on the 36th place out of 190 countries. Of course, we all know, coming from Central and Eastern Europe, that it's not only the legislation change that helps, but we really have to see how the implementation of the legislation would work in practice. For that, it usually takes additional couple of years. By that time, they changed the law again. So that was a situation in the past. However, I have to just point a couple of things. What was really improved with real estate, because real estate has become really hot investment. Serbia as a real estate country, investment country, became hot lately, and it's really interesting from Arabs to Chinese and general investors, generally all other investors. It's because they try to facilitate the one-stop shop procedure with Planning and Construction Act, which in practice should work in a way that all authorities communicate among each other. In the past, you had to go from one shelter to the other with your papers, collecting different documents and adding up. Now, in reality, you basically just upload your documents to the business register agency, and then the authorities communicate among each other, and whenever something really necessary is needed that the authorities don't have, then they will contact you for additional documents. Of course, this goes well for straightforward procedures. I must say that in case you have a bit complicated procedure or bit complicated ownership issues or parcel issues, that goes a bit slower, and that for that you really need to have a good lawyer and good advisor to do your due diligence prior to starting that project. But certainly there are also other legislation changes that improved, such as appraisers law on appraisers that would help, in this case, appraising real estate, and it would be much easier for mortgages and the banks, plus cadastre registrations, Mortgage Act. I think that lately we had really a lot of improvements, and it's not a surprise Serbia was raised here on this list.
Richard, from a kind of regional perspective, would you echo that, a banking perspective?
Yes, I think that the planning and permitting process in Serbia is really good now, really a lot better than in the past, and we are very happy to be in Serbia and be active here.
And then from a local banking perspective, Josif, are you seeing kind of improvements over the past year or two, similar, and would you echo everyone's feelings?
I agree. I think that the market is growing, definitely, and I think that we passed a lot of difficult years in Serbia related to the market, related to the price, and related to the actually NPL clients that we have on the market from 2008 or 9 and until now. I think that the banks slightly have restrictive credit procedures related to the construction. But on the other hand, we have a competition on the market of all of the banks. And this competition is actually generated by lower cost of funds that the banks have on the market today. And also because of decrease of NPL on the market. Today, according to the information that we have from National Bank of Serbia, NPL on the market is around 17%, which is lower than the last quarter. I would like to share with you, if I may, let's say average prices on the market, what we have in our economy. So for the euro loans, in period of March, we have an average interest rate around 3%, and it is mostly in the working capital loans. We have some increase, and we have for investment loans average market average interest rate around 3.4%. For dinars, it is average 5.9, and for working capital is 5.4, and for the other loans, which includes investment loans, it is around 6.4 up to 6.7. This is the general information that I would like to share with you, and then we can talk about details related to the construction,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah.
Okay.
So those seem like pretty decent figures from a legal perspective. Everything seems like it's going right direction from a banking perspective. So, Jura, you're on the ground here. Are you getting the benefit of all this kind of thing? What's your perspective on it all?
Well, we have always been very quick to adapt to all the changing conditions. So, of course, whenever it becomes easier, we are definitely we definitely like to have this process as easy as possible. I have to say that with the new building permitting process with electronic permits, definitely we eased up the whole process, but there are still a few technical issues that are happening in the system, but I think that they will be improved in the coming period. In general, I think that the permitting process is very quick now and very efficient. But as Maria had said, only once you have a clean title and ownership of the land. Usually the biggest problem in Belgrade for developers is to find land plots that are big enough and that don't have too many legal issues. And in Belgrade, they're ranging from restitution from the old nationalized assets from the communist period. Then also we have illegal ownership with illegal objects, and we have Republic Agency, how would you translate it to English? Republic Agency for Government Assets or something like that. I don't know how it would translate. And the city of Belgrade that are also sharing ownership in some of the land plots. So that's also a procedure which takes quite some time to resolve. Of course, all the government authorities are working as fast as they can, but in reality, it takes between, I don't know, 3 and 9 months to resolve any legal issues if they exist on the piece of land. From the banking perspective, I have to say that the banks in Serbia are becoming very professional, and they're getting to know the whole procedures from the very beginning to the end. That creates a situation for us which is easy to work with, and we can fairly easily know what would be the conditions and whether we will be able to get the financing or not. So I have to say, in general, the whole situation is greatly improving, and we can see that with the number of cranes in the city of Belgrade. I think that's how this panel is called. Yeah. So there is a lot of cranes and there is a lot of activities happening at this point, especially in the residential and office sectors, but also in the retail sectors. We are seeing quite a few of new shopping centers happening at this point.
Fantastic, thank you. So it's all very positive from what we've seen. And I noticed the banner over there, Serious Officers, developed by Erdster. Has it been positive throughout that process with you? Has it been a kind of a nice ride, or were there a few problems that you had to overcome? What would your kind of key points be on that kind of size deal?
I mean, there are always a couple of issues in any project, but basically we're very, very happy with the way it developed. As I mentioned earlier, we're very happy with the way the planning and permitting process went. We have an excellent construction company, and we're very happy that the first phase will open in around 2 weeks. The new headquarters of Erste Bank in Serbia open, so they have a countdown clock in their offices at the moment. So
staff are pretty excited, I think.
And Maria, we were talking about it before because being a lawyer, I'm always interested in what the burning issues in the legal sector are. But you mentioned a few things. Maybe you can kind of expand on those to the audience.
Yeah, I might add some downsides. Now, I'm very happy to hear that Erste has a very good progress. But we, of course, have clients that are and have been struggling despite this increase or acceleration of the procedure. Last year, at this same conference, we had IKEA being represented, where their representative talked how they had a special unit that was formed in the government for them just to resolve all the issues, because all the obstacles that they have really to unite different authorities in Serbia. We have sort of a similar case, the owner of Hotel Yugoslavia, that we are struggling, and even though we have a help from the city of Belgrade, I mean, we constantly have obstacles on our way. As you all know, the reason, I mean, this is the history of the old regime, is that we before there was no ownership on construction land. It was recently introduced, and all the land was on the regime of a right of use. So in order to start constructing now, a right of use is not enough. You have to convert the land into ownership, and this conversion can be quite difficult, especially, you know, in privatization, land that was acquired through privatization. So basically, this process, even though regulated now, at one point it was put on hold, now it is again regulated, it is quite slow. And not only that process, but any process regarding ownership issues can be stopped at any time in case the authority realizes somebody inscribed any inscription in the land registry on litigation, attempt to, you know, require rights on land, which in practice means that somebody can have a malicious or simply bad faith manner just to keep you out of finishing or completing your request. This is what many of investors can face. Not only that, but the big problem with conversion is also that, as Juro mentioned, the restitution requests that were many would also stall such a procedure of conversion until the time such restitution is completed, which is, in my opinion, completely wrong, because this makes sense only when when an applicant of this is a public company, or the company or socially owned company which was not privatized, because we all know that restitution in REM does not exist. It's not possible if something is privatized in the meantime. And in cases of privatized company, this should not stall the procedure, but it still does. So I think this is the probably largest problem, and this again comes down to implementation of the laws. There should be some regulation on how to proceed, or instruction how to proceed in these cases where authorities don't have to wait for certain procedures to finish.
Do you see that happening? Is there some kind of what we'd call like a white paper, or some kind of initial kind of discussion
No,
about?
There is no, this is implementation procedure. This is not happening, and I think this is burning issue to resolve if we want to speed up certain projects that are really important to this city.
Jura, would you agree with that? Bearing in mind, you know, you're on the ground, you go through all these processes quite a bit. What do you agree, or do you think there's kind of a way to overcome?
It's working now. Yes, I agree. Definitely those problems exist. And the worst part, in my belief, in most of the cases, it's not... it's just a situation where certain government officials are simply afraid not to damage the interests of the government. So even though when the case is very clear and easy to resolve, they're still pushing it through the whole official channels all the way through, and giving official complaints and verifications and everything that is needed, just in order to cover themselves and to avoid the situation where they might not have acted in the best interest of the government. I think that this is something that that we should try to find a way how to overcome, but I don't see it happening, as it's quite difficult, and simply those people are afraid.
So that no doubt has a knock-on effect for finance. And so you were talking before about your different rates, etc. I know back in the day, you know, in between 2008 and 2012, it was very difficult to get decent finance in Serbia, for example, development finance. I think that's changed, and I think things have improved, but no doubt these kind of problematic issues, you know, you're not going to lend until you fulfill all your conditions precedent, and no doubt some of these are going to be conditions precedent in a loan agreement. What your kind of feeling on all that is, and whether things have improved, and the whole development finance, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the kind of rates on the development finance side and LTVs, loan to value, etc. What your kind of feel for the market is now, Josip.
Yeah, thank you. I think that definitely we have a progress in financing. I have to say that I understand the investors. They have a lot of problems here on the market, definitely. And I think all of the problems we are discussing here on the table. It is actually three problems. It is legal problem, it is financing problem, and it is, let's say, the problem of contractors and subcontractors. This is the main issue related to one investor who would like to raise some financing in a special purpose vehicle. And then we have banks with a very restrictive credit risk. But let's say in defense of the banks, I have to say that this is generated with history that we have here on the market. And history have shown us problems that we have. The main problems that I can appoint here are related actually to the construction. We have a main constructor and we have subcontractors, and we as a bank always are disbursing loan to the investor and then to main contractor and subcontractors. In the practice, we had a lot of these issues with financing, because the main contractor sometimes have more real estates on the market that he is dealing with. And then the monitoring of this money going from the bank to the investor to the main contractor and after that to the subcontractor is not properly monitored by the banks, and also not properly monitored by investors. And then we had a situation that subcontractors did all of the work that they have to do, and the main contractor didn't pay amount which has to be paid to the subcontractors. Then we are going in a circle. Who is making this problem and why we have this kind of the problem? So the monitoring of all of the works for the bank is very important. In evaluation of the, let's say, credit package, I understand, again, the investors, they have a lot of problem with the banks because they have to show 1 million informations related to the project. And this procedure is still, I think, pretty heavy for all of the investors. But again, I'm telling you, this is related to the past. This is related to the past that we have with the MPLs, etc. How now market is growing and we have foreign investors, even domestic investors, I think the market is growing in the right direction, and then the banks will be more open for the construction and and financing, definitely.
You talked about NPLs, and I know it's a kind of a regional question. Lots of the countries of the whole region have a similar particular problem. And I know that the EBRD have been on board and they put together some kind of team that are coming over to here, to Belgrade, to Serbia, to look at that question. Are you finding that? How are you trying to resolve those problems? What's the kind of initiative from the banks to try and resolve those kind of problems?
I can mention things that are related to the banking sector, definitely, and also for the commercial bank. All of the banks in past few years are dealing with NPLs pretty much. I think that all of the problems are behind us now. The banks started all of the processes in collection of all of the receivables from potential bad clients, and through the execution, through the bankruptcy procedures, etc., etc. And I think that some of the banks open some legal entities which are buying these, let's say, receivables, and then after that selling on some kind of the tenders. And we have now on the market a lot of, I think, investment funds which are interesting in these bad assets and also with the bad loans. But I think that this is, the end. You know, I think that all of these problematic loans are behind us now. We are going from this again into the new phase of financing, definitely. Because if you ask me, I believe and I have seen and I can feel that on the market, on the banking market, we have a lot of liquidity, and we are eager to find good projects, and we are eager to find good clients for financing. I think this is the past, you know. I think the new era is coming, and definitely we have to increase our credit activity.
Very good, very positive. And Richard, there's been lots of talk throughout the course of this morning about kind of the region in general. And apart from these like few problems that you get with any kind of deal anywhere kind of thing, are you seeing kind of Belgrade as one of these kind of hub for the region? I noticed obviously the new offices that you're building. Are you doing other deals in the region? What's hot and what's not?
Well, I think long-term Belgrade, I mean, it started 10 years later than everywhere else, and they're still 15 years behind the bulk of Central European capitals. So there's a huge amount of potential in Belgrade, and I think you'll see that, or you see it already in terms of the development that's taking place. So the stock of retail space in Belgrade will probably more than double in the next 2 to 3 years, depending when the big schemes finally get completed, but probably by 2020. In terms of offices, I would expect next year to probably be the single biggest year of production of new offices in Belgrade going forward. And finally, there's a massive demand in Belgrade, but also across Central Europe, for a modernization of the housing stock. We're still in a position where more than 50% of the housing stock in Central Europe was built in communist times. And in the 50s, they were building okay. But in the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s, they built rubbish. So a huge portion of the population across Central Europe, which is getting richer year by year, has a massive demand for affordable, attractive, modern housing. And that will be something that will drive the real estate business and the construction business across Central Europe for the next decades. Not just a 1 or 2 year trend. That will take a long time to do. So at the moment, Belgrade is producing roughly 5,000 new units per year. There's about 500,000 residential units in Belgrade, so it would take them 100 years on today's production levels to modernize.
Well, demand, supply, all that kind of thing, what kind of effect has that had on prices kind of thing? Are prices quite stable, or are they still, I think it's on an upward curve from what I can see, but I'm not sure. Maybe Jura, you've got your finger on the pulse and prices and what's happening in Belgrade at the minute.
Well, I would say that the prices are gradually increasing. We have seen this trend in the last 2 years, although I have to say that this is a sustainable growth, so not like in the period from, let's say, 2005 until 2008, when we had some crazy increases due to mass production of smaller buildings and very high demand. And at this point, I agree, yes, Belgrade has around 5,000 units of produced annually, and the demand is still around 10,000. So the demand is much, much higher than the supply, and definitely I think that the developers can profit from that. Also, the buyers are getting to be more and more informed about the project, so they know what they want to buy, and they're getting to know all the details about the projects. So this is pushing developers as well to improve from project to project and always to make something new and more interesting for the market.
Richard, did you want to add something there?
Yeah, I think Belgrade grew by around 18,000 people last year. So that kind of indicates, it's a growing city. You can expect it to continue to grow so that it will become a bigger economic force within Serbia. So, the demand for housing would just increase.
Well, when you're talking about the kind of finance for the project deals that are happening in and around the kind of region and hub of Belgrade, the connections with rails, Novi Sad, the motorways, everything that's happening, it's just going to expand, and there's going to be a bigger kind of hub of population, of people coming to work and potentially not living in Belgrade, but coming to work in Belgrade. So it'll be very interesting over the next few years. But Maria, I feel like I'm neglecting you from the legal perspective. No, is there anything else you wanted to add there as to?
Well, speaking about the residential properties, and I can't agree more. Belgrade definitely needs more high-end properties. I think there is a need. There is a second-hand property that Mr. Wilkinson rightly said rubbish, but there's a lot of truly need for regular condos. I think like this lately we had a couple of these investments in Belgrade, and I think there would be more and more of those. But having that mentioned, I wanted to speak just briefly about the property tax in Serbia. We had a Filipovic conference in Zagreb in April, and I mentioned this briefly because in Croatia there is no property tax. They are about to introduce it. We have a property tax for years, and we never even ask how and why they calculated that, because we just don't understand as citizens how they calculate that tax. It's very, very complicated. And I think that's one of the major problems, because it's not transparent. It is transparent if you have a company, a medium or a large accounting company which uses international standards in accounting. And in that case, you get a fair value of your property or building, and based on that, it's easy to get a tax rate which is 0.4% from that fair value, and that is your annual property tax. In case you're a physical person or a small enterprise, you are in a completely different treatment, and you are in trouble because you depend on some arbitrary local authorities' decisions that are brought, and it's not really clear. It goes from one municipality to the other how these are brought. In fact, what criteria they use to bring them, and you would also see that it goes progressively. Up to 10 million dinar, it's 0.40%, but then from 10 million dinar, it goes 0.6 plus over that amount, and then more. So it's really, really hard to come to a right, precise amount. You wouldn't be able, as a layman, to calculate your property tax. On the other hand, if you we also have a tax of transfer of absolute rights, which is 2.5% on the value of the sale. So when you compare the value or the value of the transfer tax on absolute right and the tax on the property right, you get a completely different values. The municipality takes into account. So this is another area where I think needs to be resolved and treated by the authorities, because if we're going to have high-end properties for individuals, they as well want to know how much taxes they will pay for.
And are the authorities aware of this kind of problem? Are they dealing with it, or is it a kind of a long-term type thing, or what do you think?
I think this is one of the problems that is still on hold. I think we are still dealing with other things, but I think eventually, the more educated the population of Belgrade becomes and more aware, this will come to agenda. I'm sure. I would love it to come faster rather than slowly.
Now, I can't be on this panel, which has got cranes in the reference in the title, and not talk about the Belgrade waterfront. Controversial, some people might think. I quite like it. They got rid of all that junk that was there before, so it looks nicer. But that's a real simplistic view. Maybe some people have got certain thoughts. It'd be interesting, Juro, to see what your thoughts are in relation to the waterfront, and whether you think it attracts investment, and whether you think it's a good for the city of Belgrade.
I think it's very good for the city of Belgrade, and definitely Belgrade needed a project of that kind. It will definitely become a landmark with its infrastructure and layout and the way it looks. I mean, it's really bringing Belgrade closer to bigger cities and more attractive cities. Definitely it will use area which was completely forgotten and full of rubbish and I don't know what. So even now, I mean, if you go and walk on the walkway which they created, I mean, it's already very, very beautiful and pleasant to spend some time there. In terms of the timeline, I think they're also facing some difficulties and that the development process is taking a bit longer than it should. But in general, I'm very much in favor of that project, and I think that it will bring more foreign investors to Belgrade and in general raise the prices of the apartments in Belgrade and the office space and everything. So it will in general improve the whole market. And I think we definitely need more projects of that kind. And from the information which I have, there is a lot of interest from foreign investors who would be willing to invest in similar properties also in Belgrade. But again, the big problem is with finding land that has a clean title and which is easy to acquire. So this is now the biggest problem. I mean, even if you talk to the representatives of City of Belgrade, they will tell you that all big pieces of land which are governmentally owned have some issues at hand.
So everything in summary seems quite positive, but you've just got this clean title is a real issue. And it has a knock-on effect to the banks as well. Obviously, they're not going to lend until all this is kind of sorted out.
Yeah, it's a big issue, of course, which can always get resolved, but it takes quite a lot of time to do that. In terms of financing, that's not the problem because, and we as a company also don't have any problems in financing because we are structuring our projects the way the banks want to see them. So if you do that, I mean, to create always a separate SPV vehicle for every single project and create clear budgets and cash flows, I mean, there are no major issues with that. Banks also know what are the required documents that the investor needs to provide in order to feel the bank secure, and also what was mentioned before, the issues with general contractors not paying the subcontractors. I think that's now resolved because all the banks had a lot of experience with that, so I think it's now in the past. And in general, the banks are now requiring special let's say, letters of confirmation from the subcontractors before every next installment. So in that case, it can be easily verified whether the general contractor actually paid the subcontractor. I would like to reflect one interesting thing in regards with the taxes, and this is basically the city municipality tax, which is quite important for construction. So in order to obtain a construction permit, you need to pay the tax based on the gross area that you will construct. In the latest change of pricing, we had a significant increase, which was almost 25%, and so far in the recent history, I think it was the biggest increase. The way of calculation that the way the government calculates the tax is basically taking the average prices of the market in the municipality per sector as it is divided. And I'm almost certain that there has not been an increase of 25% in the general pricing level of the apartments. And lately, that's interesting that happened. I think they've realized that too, so now they introduced an additional discount of 10% until the next price list comes out. So maybe that's something interesting to mention.
Yeah, which is a good thing. At least they're taking, looking at the situation, assessing the situation, and then kind of adapting.
They really assessed it very quickly, and I think basically 2 months after the change, it was adapted and fixed. So.
I'm conscious of the time because I think we're running up to 1 o'clock, and maybe 1 o'clock's time for lunch. I know a few people are hungry. I'm not. I'm on a diet, but there you go. That's another problem. I'm going to open it up to the audience. Any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Any questions? A good question. We've got a question over here. Maybe there's a microphone for this chap over here, or if you've got a loud voice, you can shout.
Okay, let's try like this.
Yeah.
So one of the things that could support long-term investors to come here would be introduction of real estate investment trust that our regulation does not recognize. A few years ago, there were some rumors that it will be here present. Do you have some insights about real estate investment trust?
And I take it, who are we going to direct that question to? Maybe, well, anybody, any volunteers? No volunteers. So excellent question. So we'll go back, we'll confer, and let's talk about REITs and, yeah? Maybe Richard?
I mean, I would think that institutional investors would probably first come in to buy individual properties rather than REITs. I think REITs would be rather more aimed at getting mobilizing retail investors because the advantage of them is that you can invest in a property without having all of the money that you would need to buy the property. So I would think, in terms of the development of the market, probably the first thing you would need is a lot more activity, and not just interest, but real activity, real purchasing from institutional investors, either domestic or international. But really, to improve the long-term attractiveness of the market, you really need active international investors, and you don't really have those at the moment. You have active developers who develop and own at the moment, would probably quite like to sell one or the other thing, but there isn't really a long queue of buyers.
But I think you'll agree with me, Richard, that the interest, I've seen it on my side as well, from maybe, foreign potential buyers has increased over the past year or two.
Absolutely, there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of talk, there's a lot more focus on Belgrade and Serbia, but at the moment it's talk and there's not so much real substance behind it.
If I may just add, we still face high-risk investors on this territory. So, the real, I think not real, but these investors that operate in more developed economies are still not interested in our countries. These are mostly Israelis, Greeks. We do have, but local investors that are behind some trusts, well structured tax, investment trust, but in fact, locals are behind. So I think it'll take some time for that.
And maybe I can add there, you know, coming from the UK, people looked at London, for example, as a safe haven for investment back in the day. So maybe the returns were 2, 3, 4% maximum, but people said, oh no, you'll get a decent return and it's safe, politically stable. But hey, you know, they've opted out, Brexit, things a little bit crazy at the minute, elections all over the place. So maybe these investors have a bit of an appetite to diversify their portfolio and come to regions where they might think, well, the risk isn't too far from the UK, not that far, and you'll get a better return, who knows? So maybe it's food for thought. Any other questions? Well, I think, panelists, thank you very much. I think that's been an insightful panel discussion on Belgrade. I think everyone, if we can give everyone a round of applause, that would be a nice way to finish off. Enjoy your lunch.